Hello everyone, thank you so much for joining in. We are Women Who Code Python, and this is the Ask Me Anything series. Our mission is to inspire women to excel in technology careers, and our vision is a world where women are representative as technical executives, founders, VCs, board members, and software engineers. Our target are the engineers with 2 or more years of experience looking for support and resources to strengthen their influence and level up in their careers. We have a code of conduct, and we are an inclusive community, and we dedicate to providing an empowering experience for all the participants in our supports our communities, regardless of gender identity, expression, physical appearances, body size, race, ethnicity, age, religion, or anything else. And we have the full version of the report here, so you can read the complete code of conduct by going to this link. So we do not tolerate any sort of harassment or discrimination. We are a strong community and we are expanding quickly. We have 230,000 members already. We have 70 networks in 20 countries, and we have members from all around the world and 97 plus countries. We have done 10,000 plus events so far, and we are still counting that. We have conference tickets and scholarships that are also provided by our platform. Uh, and we also give access to jobs and resources and infinite connections. Our movement is as the world changes, we can be a connecting force that creates a sense of belonging while the world is being asked to isolate. So, this is the Ask Me Anything series, and today we have Megan with us. Thank you so much, Megan, for doing this and joining us. So, Megan is a data scientist at Microsoft, and I'll start over to give the mic to Megan to let her tell us more about her. So, I'll just stop sharing my screen.
Thanks,
Hello,
Yashika.
Megan.
So much for inviting me to come and chat today.
Thank you so much for taking our time, and we really look forward to get a lot of knowledge from you today.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Well, to give a little intro, my name is Megan. I also go by Nalani, and I'm a data scientist at Microsoft. I have been for about 2 years now, a little over 2 years. And it's so great to see everybody from all over the world here today. Super, super cool. And I think I just want to say that is one thing I really appreciate about working at Microsoft is I am always meeting people from all over the world with a whole bunch of different backgrounds and cultures. So that's a constant excitement at work. I am happy to answer any questions about Microsoft, life as a data scientist, how I got into data science, what it's like to be a woman in tech for anyone who's maybe pivoting their careers. Happy to talk about, thoughts on maybe going to grad school. I just started my master's in data science, so I'm in the program right now at the University of Washington, and continuing to work full time at Microsoft. I've been on 2 different teams in the company. My first team focused on mixed reality HoloLens, and my current team is more of a traditional team that focuses more on content. And if you are familiar with like templates in like Microsoft Word, Excel, PowerPoint, or templates at office.com, support.microsoft.com, you can think about like running experiments and A/B tests on those different services, building models to do predictive analysis, and also to look at engagement. So those kinds of things. And then my undergraduate degree is in computer science. I graduated from the University of Portland, which is a small private school in Oregon, about 2 years ago, May 2018. So it's a little bit about me. I am studying full-time. I see a question in the chat. I am studying full-time this quarter currently. But after this quarter, I will be dropping to half-time, or part-time, which is one class a quarter. Just the way the tuition reimbursement works at Microsoft is they'll pay for 2 classes if I take 2 this quarter, but then every other quarter it's 1 class. So that is the reasoning.
Thank you so much for sharing that, and I really love how Microsoft supports education along with work. So that is really commendable. So I have a question, like, how did you choose data science out of all the options with computer science? How did data science come to your mind, and why did you choose that specifically?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was in high school, then I didn't know what I wanted to do really. I mean, before I wanted to be a chef, but then after working at 2 different restaurants, waitressing at Olive Garden, then I realized I didn't want to do that. So I ended up joining Microsoft's DigiGirls program, which is a program for high school girls. So if anyone is in high school or maybe has like a daughter or a friend or someone who is in high school, then highly recommend the program. It's 1 week every summer. It's free, all girls, high school, super fun. But that was my first experience with really that much tech. And then I decided to go into computer science. But then once I started my degree program in computer science, I realized there was so much you could do with computer science. You could do web development, you could do robotics, you could do a whole bunch of other things, right? You could do security, you could do IoT, you could do data science. So I ended up doing a bunch of clubs and a whole bunch of activities, like small projects to try and figure out what I wanted to do. I looked into like computational biology, I looked into a bunch of different things. And I quickly realized that I definitely did not like web development. That wasn't for me personally. But then in my second internship, I had a lot of fun doing time series analysis for Intel. And that was the first time I realized, how powerful big data could be and insights that you can extract from big data and how fun modeling was. And then after I took algorithms and artificial intelligence in school, then I had a third internship, which is focused on machine learning, and it was anomaly detection on networks. And from those 2 internships and my 2 favorite classes, I realized I think I want to be either a data scientist or a machine learning specialist. So in my interviews and, when I was looking for jobs my senior year of college, then that's what I focused on and ended up doing data science, and it's been really, really great. So that's why I decided to go get my master's in data science as well, because I wanted to be sure that this is the field I wanted before I committed to a master's program. So it's a lot of time, but that's how it's up here.
Absolutely. I think that I also tried a lot of different things before choosing data science. So I tried web development, app development, and then I thought this is not something that interests me. So let's try data science. And I'm so happy that I took that right decision on right time. And I'm really enjoying it so far as well.
That's wonderful. That's super awesome.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you are doing a higher degree in data science. So there are mixed opinions on opting for masters or not. So do you think like the higher degree for a career in data science important? I know that could be beneficial and add a lot to your resume, but do you think that is a requirement or is it necessary to do that?
I would say absolutely not. You do not have to have a degree in honestly anything technical. My manager is a principal data science manager and he has an undergraduate degree in psychology, like super, I mean, like related in the communications and you work with people way, but like besides that, he didn't have a background in statistics or computer programming, right? It's things that you can just pick up and learn either on the job or through boot camps. And I would say like half the people on my team don't have technical degrees. So it's not a requirement. I think the only requirement really is that you're curious about data and the problems you're trying to solve with data. And that, you understand the impact of what your work could be doing. And then the hunger to learn, right? Because I feel like in any field, any job you have, you'll just be learning all the time. So, just yeah, I think just the capacity and interest in learning new things.
Okay. Um, so does a data scientist needs to be a better statistics than a software engineer? Because I think that for a data science role, you need to focus on a lot of things. Like there is statistics, then there is problem solving skills, there are another visualization skills that are necessary. So where does coding come in that? So how much coding is necessary to be a data scientist?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would say absolutely a data scientist will know more statistics and about model building than a computer scientist or a software engineer, I should say, right? And then in terms of programming, then a data scientist is maybe like 50% of the way there to a software developer. Like you don't have to be, like super proficient in like a bunch of languages and be able to like design architecture and, it's more, you need to be able to create prototype models, I would say. Be able to prototype models, be able to manipulate data. It's helpful to know both R and Python, but I would say like it's okay to be more proficient in one than the other. For example, I am not savvy in R. Like I can get by in R, but I am more savvy in Python, right? And that is what I choose for pretty much all of my work. So I would say it's awesome, that this is Women Who Code Python, because, if you're interested in data science, I think that's like a really, really great tool for you to use. And also, I would say to get your foot in the door, then you don't need to necessarily know all of the math and statistics that go behind every single algorithm that you might be applying. I'm sure many of you are aware, if not all of you are aware, that there are many different libraries you can use in Python. And I would say at first, the best way to get your foot in the door is actually just knowing when to apply which model. And then after you kind of get some of that experience, and when you're doing a project, for example, then you can go in and learn, okay, well, I know I should apply this model in this situation. And now how does it work? You can do that after. You don't have to. And I think that's kind of like the difference between something more applied and when you go to school. Because when you go to school, you'll learn how it works and then you'll apply it. But that's not incredibly necessary for the real world. You just need to know what to apply when and how it's, just appropriate and applicable to the problem. But it's not necessary to know why it works. I think the why just makes you better, it's not an entry, but like it will help you get from, I guess, mid-level to expert level, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that not all the tools are necessary for every task, but it's necessary to know which tool to use when. So that's a brilliant point. And I also vote for Python, Python community.
Awesome.
So based on the last question, I want to ask that what makes a good data scientist? So when you are in job, what are the skills that make you stand out from others? So what are the qualities of a good data scientist?
Yeah, so I would say a good data scientist will be, well, okay, there's two different kinds of a good data scientist. One is you are a well-rounded data scientist, that you have it all. Like you can do A/B experimentation and you can design a good experiment, right? You could do the power calculations, you can do the analysis after it's done and give the recommendation. So that's, an aspect of being a well-rounded data scientist. You will also know modeling, right? You will be able to do both statistical and traditional modeling and also machine learning. And then you'll also be able to do, more traditional data analysis, and be able to do exploratory data analysis and find insights. And in order to do those things, and I should also say data visualization, of course.
Yeah.
Building reports, building solid visualizations to communicate insights, to communicate, data clearly to people who don't look at data most of their day. And then what underlies those four things is the tools and skills and ability to learn the tools and skills to deliver on those four things that ladder up to whatever goal is trying to be achieved, right? So I would say that's one kind of a good data scientist, is you kind of have like the whole package, right? You have statistical analysis, you have good programming, you have some modeling abilities and machine learning, business sense, data visualization. The other kind of good data scientist is the one who still has, a little bit of all of those things, but it can be less because they're specialized in a very specific niche area of data science, like, for example, computer vision, right? They're an excellent computer vision scientist, and maybe they know less about experimentation and less about the other, data visualizations and the other things. But they're really, really good at, for example, like the deep neural nets and understanding them really well and the complexities, right, for applying to those problems. And similarly for NLP and different problem spaces. So I would say there's two. If you want to specialize or have kind of the expert well-roundedness.
Okay. So what is the best interview question that anyone has asked you till now?
Ooh, that's a tough one. Best interview question.
Best, like the complex one or the one that was really difficult for, like it took a minute to think about that sort of question.
I guess I will say this actually. So this is a little different, but whenever you're interviewing, you want to stand out, right? You want to make a good impression that's different from the other candidates. So I would recommend that, everybody has stories, right, that they have that make them unique, right? And what makes you unique is what makes you stand out from the other candidates. So I would say like the most memorable question to me was when my interviewer asked me something along the lines of like, tell me about a time where you like took initiative or something like that. It was one of those more kind of vague behavioral questions. And the answer I gave was about my third internship. And my third internship was supposed to be a traditional modeling internship. They gave us a list of 150 different tasks, different anomalies to find. And they said, okay, we want you to create one model for each anomaly, just straight up deterministic, it flags it, that's what we want. But the thing is, like, I had just taken algorithms in AI, and I recognized that that was a perfect problem for machine learning, right? So I ended up pitching it that we use machine learning instead of traditional modeling. And at first, my managers were saying, you know what, we are not very familiar with machine learning. So let's do the deterministic modeling for the summer. And if you have time at the end, you can explore ML. So my first week, I ended up creating the first traditional model that only found the first anomaly on the list. And I also created a really rough rudimentary machine learning model that demonstrated how it does the same thing they want. It flags, the anomaly on the list, but it has so much more potential because you could have one model that detects multiple anomalies. So you could have a real-time solution of running your data through one model instead of 150 models. And because they were paying per throughput of their data that they were running, then it saved them a ton of money. And my managers ended up being in that meeting. So then an hour later, my team was called in and we were green lighted to work on machine learning the rest of the summer. So that's the scenario I ended up responding with. And I think that was one of the moments, right, where I was differentiated from the other candidates because of the concrete example. And so I would recommend, when you're preparing for your interviews, then you're looking and thinking about those different instances in, your life of work or, school, or maybe like an activity that you enjoy doing, and come up with those instances that you can create and wrap a story around.
I really like that. That is genius. The whole idea was brilliant. Okay, so if we are talking about jobs, so what should be the strategy right now to find jobs? Because things are different right now. It's more than difficult to find a decent job right now, and especially for entry level people, people seeking for entry-level positions, it's really different for this year. So what should be the strategy that you would recommend anyone to follow right now?
Definitely a very serious question right now, because I totally see it. There's so many people that are, trying to find jobs, and a lot of companies are either not hiring less, or have specific rules even. Like I recently found out that Facebook had a specific rule where they weren't hiring data scientists with less than 2 years of experience or something like that, which is surprising to me. But every rule has exceptions. But yeah, I was just surprised because Facebook's like so big. I didn't expect the big companies to stop hiring. Microsoft is still hiring. So, if you're interested in applying to Microsoft, definitely do that. I would say that there are many different, so, okay, one thing is there's a ton of applicants. There are always a ton of applicants. So standing out is super important, right? So I would say the number one way you could do that is conferences, right? And if you can get, face-to-face, virtually, time with a recruiter, then that's your best bet, because then you have one-on-one attention with them, even if it's for 5 minutes, which is huge. The second best way is to have a really, really excellent resume, because what happens is for one job posting, they could get 1,000 resumes, right? And what happens is the resumes get put into piles, right? They put into like an A, B, C pile. And if you get put in a C pile, you basically don't get looked at. If you get put in a B pile, you might get looked at, but maybe not. So I would say you want to be in the A pile. And the way to do that is to make your resume one page, to get a ton of feedback from a bunch of different people on it, right? About whether it's clear and it's easy to read and understandable if someone spent 30 seconds looking at your one-page resume, right? So definitely has to be super readable, formatted, grammar's correct, right? That's just one thing. And then the other thing, of course, is your content, right? What do you have on there? And I would say in every single bullet description, you need to have what you did and the impact it had, or why you did the project. And then also, it's great to add what technical skills or abilities or tools that you used for that project. If you don't have a section for skills up above, you can either put it in both places or one or the other. It's up to you. But I would say definitely the one-page resume is key. Having a GitHub, a website, those things are also excellent. A solid LinkedIn is really important too. But I would say the order would go conferences and resume, because if you meet someone at a conference, you also have to have a great resume. And then just your resume from applying, and then hopefully, if you should hopefully be networking and expanding and maybe getting some referrals too. Still, resume applies, has to be excellent. And then it goes LinkedIn, because some people will just, find you through LinkedIn. But I feel like that is a little more of a gamble, right? Because then they're reaching out to you, probably not necessarily the other way around. But you also can reach out to people on LinkedIn, which I will just spend a note saying that if you really want to work for a certain company, right? If it's Microsoft, Google, whatever, or even if it's a small company, this actually works out even better, is you find someone from that company who has a role that you're interested in and is at least a senior level, ideally, or higher, like a little higher, because they might have more say and a way into hiring. But you just ask them to have an informational, and then that way they'll get to know you a little bit. You can ask them for feedback on your resume, say that you're looking. And sometimes, if they really like you, it goes really well. Or if their team is hiring, or they know a team that is, then you kind of get fast tracked into the hiring loop that way, right? Because it's kind of like when you go to a conference, you can also get fast tracked. And then after that, I would say comes GitHub and website, just because when there's so many applicants, your website and GitHub do not get looked at unless they've already decided to interview you. So resume is your foot in the door, because if you don't have a good resume, but you have an excellent website, then a lot of the times I don't think you're probably going to get the interview. But if you have an excellent resume, regardless of whether or not you have a website, then you will get in an interview, if they've decided that, regardless of the website. And I will say personally that, especially when I was applying to Microsoft and was a student, I did have a GitHub, but I actually didn't link it to my resume because I knew that, I would have had to spend more time cleaning it up before I would want to show a recruiter. But the one thing I did have was a solid resume, and then I also went to conferences. And I will say that creating resumes has been like kind of one of my superpowers, I would say. So if you want feedback on your resume, I am happy to give you feedback on your resume for if you're interested in data science or being a software engineer. I will say, I'm sure if you're like wanting to be a product manager or something, the resumes will look different. So I'm not as confident that my feedback will be as relevant if you wanted to go that route. But definitely if you're interested in being a data scientist or a developer or like a data engineer or data analyst, then I can definitely provide feedback on anyone's resume.
Thank you so much for breaking that process down. Actually, one of my questions was how to prepare a resume specific to data science role, but I think you have answered pretty well for that question. So I'll move on to the next question, which is how did you apply at Microsoft? So did you directly apply through the website, the careers page, or did you have a referral?
Yes, great question. So I was a Grace Hopper Scholar the year that I was selected. So I believe that was 2019. So the way that process works is in the spring, you can apply to be a Grace Hopper Scholar. And then they let you know, I think a few months after that or something. And then they have some networking events and there's a resume database. And I will say that you do not have to be a scholar. You do not have to even be attending Grace Hopper celebration to submit your resume to the Grace Hopper resume database. So if you haven't done it, just do it. So anyone can do it. Anyone can submit their resume. And then what happens is the companies will go through the database, right, and select people because especially, in tech, when women are such a minority, they're trying to diversify, right? So companies like Microsoft and honestly, all the big companies are looking through that database and finding which candidates they want to reach out to. So I think it was 3 or 4 weeks before Grace Hopper started, then Microsoft reached out to me and I had my first phone interview with them. And I think my first question was one of those brain teaser questions. So, if you want to brush up on a couple brain teaser questions around either cups of water being moved around or like flips of a coin or, like some probability thing, then I would say like it's not a bad idea to do some brush up on those kinds of questions because it might be used as an icebreaker. So I would say, maybe spend a day just practicing some of those questions and then getting kind of the intuition for it. Because I will say for those questions, you don't have to answer them correctly to get to the next round. You just have to be able to walk through the process and what you were thinking. And sometimes they'll even give you hints and then you'll be able to figure it out. So anyway, had a phone interview. And then after that one, I had another phone interview. And then I had a 2-hour interview at Grace Hopper. And then that's when I got my offer. So again, conferences are very important.
Yeah, and I think especially now, a lot of the conferences are virtual. So it's the chance for international students as well to attend those because most of them are free of cost and generally have low cost, even if the tickets are paid. So I think it's a great way to network and find people who are hiring right now.
Yes, absolutely.
So what are some of the resources that you want to recommend to people who are job searching right now, specifically in the data science area? So let's say someone has taken the courses, completed the projects, and have their GitHub portfolio, LinkedIn resume set up. So what next? What are the things that they should focus on regarding the technical aspects of the interview or some other aspects of the interview specific to data science roles?
Yeah, I would say one is make a list of the companies you really want to work at. and then go research them. Go research them and find out more information about them, because that's another way to separate yourself out from other candidates. And I would say, going back to the resume, and also if you have a website, or even if you have a GitHub, in the README, you can add a little blurb about what you are really passionate and interested in, right? Because one of the things that companies look for is that you are excited and driven, right? Because that's someone that other people want to work with, right? So, if it's your resume, have 1 or 2 sentences saying, I am really excited about machine learning, data modeling, whatever it is. And even better if you can narrow it down in this security space, right? Or in the whatever. And then when you research those companies, come up with questions, like good questions that aren't, like you could find them online, right? And some of those good questions are also things like, what is the gender ratio breakdown when you look across the office when, pre-COVID or something like that, right? Because, those are things that it is more of a team specific thing. But I would say once you do that, and then you go find, some people on LinkedIn with, the position that you're interested in at the company you're interested in, and you do the informational, then that's another way to kind of get that wow factor, or that, oh, I want to help this person because they'd be really fun to work with, or they have a lot of potential and I want them on my team or something, right? So I would say that would be a really good thing to do. And then, preparing for interview wise, I would say looking at, common data science interview questions online broadly, and then just pick some random ones and try to answer them. And then also specifically when you go on things like Glassdoor, then, look at the companies that are on your list. And then people will usually write questions they've been asked in interviews. And I would say look those up, practice those too. And then also some companies will actually publish how they interview. So like I know Google, I think they have a whole PowerPoint deck on how they, ask questions and what you should be studying. And I'm sure Facebook has something similar with Microsoft. Then like, for example, we mostly ask like behavioral questions. So the idea is usually we don't ask a whole bunch of like strictly like program this thing questions. They're more like, tell me about a time when you demonstrated this experience, or given this scenario, what would you do, kind of a question. So it's like a little bit different, it's not like a straight up like technical question. So I would say, definitely make your list of companies first, because that will help you narrow down what to study. And also it'll help you like pinpoint on what is the most important thing to, be brushing up on.
Yeah, definitely. And what about the coding perspective? So I know that maybe some of the companies also require you to pass the whiteboard interviews or the initial hacker rank contest for the data science roles as well. So how should one prepare for that? And also what should be the level of questions? Because for software engineering, the level of questions are obviously harder. And for data science perspective, the question of levels are not that much higher. So how about that?
Yeah, so I would say going into your interview, make sure especially if it's for a data science interview, make sure you know either Python or R. Your interviewer typically will say you can choose whatever language, choose Python or R. Have some of this is actually even better because you're interviewing over a video chat right now, because you can have a list next to you, right? I'd say like just short bullets so you could just quickly maybe glance over and see it, not like have to like pause and read, but like you can have things like a list of Python libraries and packages, right? Just to like jog your memory, right? Because you'll hopefully study with a bunch of notes and then have a condensed shorter set of notes, just to jog your memory in the moment. Because especially like during interviews, I know most people get really nervous, and when you get nervous, you can forget things. So it helps to have that here. So that's a plus for you, since all your interviews are probably remote right now. But I would say either know Python or R. Your interviewer should let you choose, even if they say, oh, can you do this in Python? You can say, oh, I'm more comfortable in R, can I use R? And I've never heard of any interviewer saying no, because Python and R are both exploratory, and if you're a data scientist, you should be able to use either. So that's one. And then the other is you should know SQL, right? Or another similar query language. Like for instance, if you're interviewing at Microsoft and you knew Custo, then that would work perfectly well too. Or if you knew Scope, then that would work perfectly well too. So definitely a query language, because you could be asked questions on how to query data. And I would say you will probably be asked questions about pulling data, exploratory data analysis, manipulating data. So, like transposes, joins, pivot tables, you could be asked about that kind of stuff. And then, you may be asked a little bit about pipelining, for example, or creating a data set. You could be asked about how do you validate a data set, right? You could be asked about how you would select a model for a particular use case or scenario. I would say if you can get experience in either data visualization in Power BI or Tableau, then that would be really, really great. Specifically, if you're interested in Microsoft, I would recommend adding Power BI to your resume, because that's the one we use, of course, because it's a Microsoft product. But yeah, I think for technical, I would say Python or R, be ready with the libraries that you would use when asked a question about, for example, how you would normalize or standardize your data set, right? Yeah, those kinds of things. And then if you want to write down some quick notes about, maybe some different kinds of models and when you would use them, then I would not be surprised if you were asked a question about that too. For entry-level positions, then these are kind of the questions around which you can expect to be asked about. And then again, depending on who's interviewing you, you might get some of those more probability or statistical brain teasers. Oh, and then also have a super solid intro when they say, tell me a little bit about yourself, which I feel like 80% of the interviews I've ever had started with that. Have a really solid introduction, and always highlight what you're excited about or passionate about. And even better if it relates directly with the company or with the team that you're interviewing with, or even doing an informational for, because it'll kind of be the same thing where you start with like a 2-minute elevator pitch, right? So just practice it, time it, get feedback on it.
Yeah, and I think that the starting pitch is really important, because that also decides the direction of the rest of the interview, because that is enough for someone to judge how well the candidate is.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. Like I just interviewed several candidates a couple weeks ago, and yeah, that like just from their introduction, then like that kind of determined whether I asked them this set of questions or this other set of questions. Yeah, absolutely. Set yourself up well to tell your stories.
Yeah, absolutely. Now it's time for everybody's favorite question. So I know you already talked about the team and the work that you do at Microsoft, but again, how does a typical day in a job is for a data scientist?
Yeah, I would say typical breakdown would be maybe 15-ish% of your time is just in meetings. So you're meeting with your stakeholders, other developers, PMs, managers, in my case, designers, content writers, depending on which projects that I'm working on that day. And then there 10% of your time is responding to emails, because, that's just how a lot of the communication, especially now that we can't pop our heads into each other's offices and ask a quick question. And then I would say another 25% of the time is just finding the correct data sets to look at, right? Just making sure that you're looking at the right data sets, and you understand who owns them, the parameters, you're validating the data, you're making sure you take a look at the documentation to understand it as well, that you're doing all the right checks. You're looking for missing values, you're looking for duplicates, you're looking for inconsistencies that you're not expecting. And then you're asking questions about that, which goes back to the email. And then I would say, and what is that? Did I say 25, 30? Okay. So I would say like another 20% of the time is just, actually no, probably 30% of the time is just planning, right? It's just planning what you're going to work on and kind of like thinking through the process of how you're going to approach the problem and making sure that with the approach that you're planning, it will answer the question being asked. And then like, I would say like, okay, yeah, maybe like, I want to say 10% of the times actually the doing the work. It just seems like a lot less because I feel like there's just so much communication and planning that really has to get done before you actually just go and implement it. I would say that's kind of what seems to be the general breakdown. I mean, it kind of comes and goes in waves, right? And so what it will look like is maybe for a solid 2 weeks, you'll be doing those meetings and planning and stuff. And then the next week, you'll be doing the implementation and doing any of those checks and follow-ups with the stakeholders. So it kind of like ebbs and flows between what you do day to day, but I would say the general breakdown is kind of mostly, communication, planning, also, getting feedback on your approach from other data scientists. This is the problem I have, this is the approach I'm, thinking of taking, and then they'll say, oh, have you thought about, using this tool or these models? And then, that always kind of shifts the planning, and then you'll go do it. And part of the reason is because, like, for example, we have a bunch of VMs that we work on. So all our VMs are off unless someone's working on, like, needing to work on them, right? Because it like saves like a whole bunch of money because we have a lot of VMs and a lot of data scientists. So then once that gets approved, then we turn the VM on, do the work, take the output, shut it down. And then that's kind of the process.
Wow, actually, I see that thing floating around LinkedIn a lot, which says that 80% of the time for a data scientist is all about data cleaning. But I think there is a lot more just than that, because you mentioned communication, structuring, planning. That is something that comes before cleaning the data.
Oh
So
yeah,
what would you clean if you do not know what your plan is or what you're implementing?
absolutely. Absolutely. And I will say, if you can take either a communications or some sort of like a project management or even something like improv, group or something that could also one help you stand out in your interviews, because I would say definitely putting like your hobbies and interests on your resume that are different from others. Don't just like say that you do like a small group, say you do improv if that's what you're doing, right? And then when people ask you questions, that could be one of the stories you end up talking about.
Yeah, perfect. So it's time to take the questions from audience. So the first question is, what is a typical day in a life of a data scientist? So you already answered that. Another question, how did you approach the job hunt, is also answered. The next question is interesting. I am a business strategist that wants to analyze sophisticated data. To do so, hence my interest is in data science. What are the top tools and programs you use on a day to day?
So at Microsoft specifically, the core tools that you'll see every data science team using is Python, R, Power BI, Custo, SQL, Cosmos, which goes along with Scope. Those are the core, and Excel, but those are the core tools that you will see shared. And then on top of that, you can have different tools based on which team you're in. So for example, some teams use this software called JMP, and they'll use that to do some quick analyses, which was the case on my first team at Microsoft. And then my current team, we don't have Jump, but what we do have something called H2O driverless AI, and we'll use that to do some quick machine learning. So for example, last week, then I used I used Python and Jupyter notebooks to, get my data in the right form. I used Scope to pull the data, right? And then I used SQL to do all the validations. But then when I got to the modeling step, then I used H2O in one of our VMs and, used light gradient boosted trees to look at the most engaging features, right, for our customers, because the training data was all of the 3,000 edit events that you could do in Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. And then the label was, did you save your document, right? So the idea was, which edit events can we whittle down to like the top 8, right, or so events that are the most predictive of a saved event. So that's kind of an example of the tools we would use. And then of course, other companies, instead of Power BI, a lot of them use Tableau. But I would say, Python, SQL those are the core ones that if you're interested in data science, being a data analyst, it's really great to know those.
Perfect. So another question is somewhat that we already discussed, but maybe you have something else to add here. So the question says, do you have any recommendations on what the top skills to focus on are for someone who is pivoting into tech with a data science bootcamp? So someone is coming from a bootcamp and they want to know about the top skills that are required.
Yeah, definitely. I would say if your bootcamp has one of those like agreements with companies where you can do an internship after the bootcamp, and then the internship could lead to a job offer, definitely ask your program if they have something like that, because like I've met women who have gone through boot camps, did their internship, got a job offer at the end of it, and then are now working at Microsoft. So that's a great way to learn the skills necessary and actually see it for yourself in a specific team. I would say in terms of skills, it's interesting because data science is a lot. It's very multidisciplinary. Like you're kind of a statistician, you're kind of a programmer, you're kind of a business person, you're kind of a machine learning person. It's a lot of different things. So I would say you want to have a little bit of all of those things. So if you are an excellent programmer already and you focused a lot and, because you did Women Who Code Python, you're like, okay, I have pretty solid Python skills, then maybe brush up more on some of the probability and statistics and modeling, like applied modeling. So if you take a data set, right, a free online data set, whether it's from Kaggle or, something a university collected, or something the government collected, then you can take a data set, formulate a hypothesis about it, do some exploratory data analysis, maybe build a model, have that, project on the side, add it to your GitHub, you can show that project, and then also talk about the learnings you had. Because another question that people like to ask is, like when was the last time you learn something new, or tell me about a time when you learned something new. So you can talk about that, like, oh, I'm learning all the time right now, this is a project I'm working on, so I would say you kind of want all of those different skills. So if you know that you're actually not as good about, for example, connecting like I guess the impact of the work, like you build a predictor but you're like it kind of ended there for you, then maybe think about like the impact it could have, because that's another important aspect in muscle that it's good to build and then demonstrate that you're aware that that's something a data scientist should have in your interview.
Yeah, absolutely. So another question is there space right now for data science or algorithm administration through a journalism point of view?
From a journalism point of view?
Yeah.
Oh, super interesting. I will say, so in one of my classes right now, human-centered data science, we actually talked about this in journalism. So we looked at different articles, right, that had different data set focuses and visualizations, and they drew some conclusions about them, and we were asked to, you know, analyze the article and the process they walk through and look at their Jupyter notebook and the data that they used. And we went over, you know, if it was reproducible, if it was correct, if there were, you know, things that didn't quite add up, you know, like suggestions for improvement, those kinds of things. And, you know, everyone kind of had like something a little different that they thought about how data journalism could really be. And I think some of like the main things were, you know, it's a great way to, or it could be a great way to like foster transparency and also further learning, because more eyes are on the data and the process. And when that happens, you get more feedback and you can always improve, right, and find new things. And then of course, there's also a double-edged side to that is, you know, which I think is really interesting about whether, you know, you're looking at the data correctly, because you can gain insights that aren't actually true or representative or accurate from the same data set, right? When you look at something in a certain way. So double-edged side to that. I remember someone said a quote that was kind of like, when you are looking at statistics, for example, from private companies, then they don't necessarily have the motive to get the numbers right. They have the motive to get the right numbers. So yeah, data journalism is definitely like an interesting thing that actually has been growing. And I think if you're interested in data journalism, then that's super cool and super awesome. I know that, you know, magazines, newspapers hire data scientists. So that would be a good, you know, place to start looking for companies you might be interested in.
Yeah, I think that data science and machine learning, these are the things that can be applied to almost any industry. So any industry can get the benefit from the evolving technologies.
Yes, definitely.
So someone asked that, what about Julia as second language with Python?
Hmm. Um, I am not personally familiar with Julia, and I have not heard about it being used, at least in the two teams that I worked on. Yeah, so I'm not as familiar, you know, what kinds of libraries are available. I will say that the reason most people program in Python and R for data science and data analytics is because, one, it's just easy to script in, and then two, they have those nice packages and libraries set up. If Julia has something similar, then I think, and you know it already, then I think you could definitely use that in an interview and just say, do you mind if I, you know, write this solution in Julia? Then I'm sure they'll say it's fine. I remember that one of my interviews, they didn't know what language I was writing my solution in, but they were like, that's okay, because I mean, coding's very similar, right? So as long as I could explain what this line of code meant, then they would, you know, kind of like understand. And that's the main thing. So I would say if you're already comfortable in another language, or like Scala, for example, is another good one, then feel free to just, you know, say, oh, can I use this other language? And it shouldn't be a big deal in your interviews. Yeah.
Absolutely. So this is a technical question. When validating data, looking for missing values, inconsistencies, which tool do you use for that specific task?
Python. Always Python. Well, okay, sometimes SQL. Sometimes I'll use SQL if my data is already there, or if it's just easily ported to SQL because someone else like did it, for example, and it's there, then I'll just use it. But yeah, I would say usually I use Python to, you know, kind of validate the data. And then also, like, depending on the application, then that will kind of determine, you know, like, for example, how you impute missing data values, right? For example, one of the teams in Microsoft is focused on, I forget what it is, but it's like a certain kind of like risk for a disease, and it was based on these values. And for those models, they always want them to be interpretable, right? Anything that involves like a person's health has to be. So one of the things they found was that, someone decided to impute the mean value for this one missing value when the rest of the features had values, so it ended up being really misleading, but it was also really easy for them to catch that error, because when they were looking at the results of the model, they could see that, the graph went like, oh, okay, so you're higher risk if you have this level, and suddenly if you have like this one level, you jump to a super low risk, and then right after that one point, it moves back up, and then it kind of flattens out like this, right? So like that was kind of an easy, like, oh, something must be wrong with the data. And then you kind of look back through your process. And this is part of the reason why we spend so much time on planning, right? And getting feedback, is because you want to avoid, as many of these errors as possible, so that when you actually do get output of the model, then you have less noise that you're looking at. So that was easy to find. They realized, oh, that's the mean value that we put in. And so then they did a correction. And so yeah, it definitely depends on your application as well.
Yeah, that definitely depends on the situation, because same technique cannot be applied at each place. So like if you go with a generic thing, like only apply this thing each and every place, that would not work.
Yep.
Okay, so there's another question about the programming, and this time someone is asking, C programming, is it a good asset or not for a data scientist? But then again, that point comes again, that it depends on you, what you want to choose, because programming is moreover same. The logic is same, only the syntax is different regarding each of the languages we have. Python and R are mostly acceptable for data science things, because the community support is much higher for Python and R as compared to other languages in respect to data science.
I will add that if you are comfortable programming in C, then you should have like a pretty easy time picking up C# and or C++. And I will say that like, for example, at Microsoft, if you know C+ or C#, and depending on the team, I guess C++, but mainly C#, then that could be one of the things that sets you apart as a data scientist, because I will say that a lot of data scientists are not familiar with C#, and they would have to learn it, because maybe 2 hours a week, 1 hour a week on average, actually. Yeah, probably one, because I don't write it every week, but like very frequently, basically, I'll say I will have to write some C# code, right? Because the big data system, the one where we pull all your data and do the map reduce, you need to write C# for it sometimes, and these are called like scope scripts, if anyone's familiar, and you write a combination of SQL and C#. So I think it's awesome if you know C, I think it could definitely be something that helps set you apart, especially when a lot of, the people that you will be working with are engineers. They're data engineers, they're software engineers. So I think it will allow you to help bridge the gap, when you're discussing and planning, like, and collaborating with other teams. And then also, because my background's in computer science, I also studied C, C#, Java, and learned how to program in those. And coming to this current team, that's one of the reasons why my manager wanted me, was because I had more of a programming background. And then also because I was able to tie in a lot of the business impact and business sense into my work. So I would say that's really great if you know C.
And based on the scenario that you just discussed before this question, we have another question, like, did you just remove that value or replace that with the median instead?
Oh, that wasn't my team. So I didn't follow up with that team on it, but it was just something in passing when I was chatting with some of the other data scientists.
Okay, so the next question is, can you explain the roadmap for data scientist? Also, just because data science and ML sounds technical, many women are being scared to join. How would you describe this?
Yeah, definitely. I would say in tech in general, right? Any technical role, you will see less women. There's more stereotypes and there's just fewer of us, and that makes it harder. I think I would just say, like, there's been a lot of support in terms of women's communities, women's conferences, that, like, I would recommend plugging into. I know Women Who Code is also a great organization that you are already plugged into, hopefully. So I would say, plug yourself into the community, talk to other women in tech, because then it helps you to not feel like the only one. And I would say it varies from team to team. Like, I've been on teams where I've been like the only woman, or like meetings where I'm the only women. But what helps is that all the people I work with are really, really great. Like, there's no one where I'm like, oh, I have to work with them, and I don't hear, like, for example, like really sexist jokes or something in the workplace. So that definitely helps to have, a team with a good culture. So I would say, in your interviews, ask what their culture is like. Ask how many women are on the team, how long they've been there, what the turnover is. You can ask those kinds of questions, because they will give you a sense, for how the team is. And then another clue could be, did you have any women in your interview, Luke? If you met with 5 people, were they all white dudes? And I think that will help with that, because I will say, like, on my current team, there are, several other data scientists who are women. And I think that definitely helps me just feel just happier on my team. Like, it definitely helps. But yeah,
Yeah,
being
absolutely.
hard. And I would say, like, a lot of people are also excited to mentor. So you kind of have a little plus there about if you reach out to people and ask them to be your mentor or teach you or coach you about X, because you realized, oh, that person's really good at giving presentations. That person knows a lot about NLP, then they'll usually say, oh yeah, that would be really great. And then, you can meet with them, I don't know, once a week, once a month, come up with a plan. So
Yeah, I think that is really important because throughout my journey and even now when I'm learning and applying things, I think that the mentors play a big role in that because you can reach out to them for literally anything you need help with. And people are really generous to become your mentors. So you should definitely seek out for that with communities via LinkedIn, Twitter, anything that suits you best.
yes, absolutely. And then sometimes those will, in turn just become, over time, they will become your sponsors, especially when you have, mentors who are in a senior or principal or position of the like. Then, after being your mentor for 6 months and they are more familiar with the work you've done, what you're trying to accomplish, and seeing that you've accomplished them, then a lot of times, without you asking, a job opening will pop up, or someone will just happen to ask them if they think you're ready for a promotion. And then in that moment, they become your sponsor, right? And they help you get that promotion, or they help you get that new position because they recommended it, they recommended you for it, even without necessarily asking you first, because you've fostered that relationship where they know that would be something you would be interested in.
Yeah, absolutely. We are already running out of time and we have a lot of questions that you already answered. So those are on that similar terms. We do have a really broad question here. So maybe you can spend 1 or 2 minutes answering this. So the question is, we have heard through the media that there is more corruption and lack of morals when it comes to data and privacy in big tech. What is it really like to work in a company that really has a monopoly in people's data?
Yeah, that's a really, really great question. And I will say that um, it is an interesting perspective to be a data scientist in a company that has data from, people all over the world and so much of their usage data. And I've actually been really, really pleasantly surprised with how much data privacy is taken just so seriously at Microsoft. So um, it's kind of funny because, on one hand, it's like, really great for our consumers that they can opt out of their data being used for like anything. And I think it's wonderful that we don't allow, like, for example, any data collected for children to be used, right? But then on the flip side of that, as a data scientist, when you want access to data to do a certain analysis, there's a lot of checks that you have to do, a lot of trainings you have to go through, some quizzes that you need to complete. And then, just the approval process can be a little lengthy sometimes. And then when you get approval to data, after this whole thing, then this part could actually be kind of fun though, is you need to be really creative with how you end up training your model, because all your data is either not visible to you or it's abstracted to a certain level or in certain ways. So I would say like it definitely adds a layer of challenge to the actual job in itself. But overall, it's just really important that Microsoft takes privacy so seriously, just from a customer standpoint. So I hope that helps. Like I feel like I feel a lot safer knowing that like all the Microsoft products I do use, at work and on my personal time, like I feel pretty confident that the data is like being handled like respectfully and with care. So
Yeah, definitely. And if someone is interested in knowing more about the privacy and the combination of privacy and machine learning specifically, there is a lot of research going on from a lot of researchers and big institutes. So you can also check that. And yeah, the field is really progressing so fast.
yes, definitely.
Yeah. So I think we are already running over the time. We already answered a lot of the questions. Most of the questions are similar on that terms, but if people still have questions, where they can find you?
Yeah, definitely. I'll add my LinkedIn in the chat. So feel free to connect, reach out, message me. Again, happy to review resumes and give feedback on them. Thank you so much, Yashika, for having me, and thank you everyone
Yeah.
for joining in.
Yeah, I'm sharing your LinkedIn and my LinkedIn in the chat. If someone wants to reach out and connect, feel free to do so. And thank you so much, Megan, for doing this. I got to know a lot of the insights that I really didn't know before. And I think this was really helpful for our audience and everyone in the community. Thank you so much for your time and doing this.
Awesome. Yeah, this was really, really fun. Thank you so much, Jessica. Thanks,
Okay.
everybody.
Thank Thank you so much for joining, and you can join our community. So we have the Slack channel where we provide all sort of support regarding technical doubts or resources or any other information. So you can check that out and join us as well. And thank you so much again for joining. And I hope everyone have a great day. Bye bye.
Awesome. Have a good one.
Bye bye. See you.